If you are over 60, this message could completely change your life. A stroke often occurs without warning. One moment, you are full of strength and confidence, and the next, you suddenly find yourself speaking unclearly, unable to lift your arm, or losing your memory. As a neurologist, I often see elderly individuals harm themselves, not out of malice, but due to morning habits they mistakenly believe are beneficial. In reality, some of the most dangerous triggers for a stroke lie in morning exercises. The problem is not that you are exercising, but how, when, and what happens to your body during and after the activity. The good news is that most strokes can be avoided by knowing what to steer clear of. I will discuss 5 major mistakes that elderly people make during morning exercises, thereby tripling their risk of a stroke. These mistakes are widespread, often praised, and unfortunately, misunderstood. If you stay with me until the end, you will learn how to protect your brain daily, starting tomorrow morning. Let's begin with the first hidden threat: starting exercises too quickly after waking up. Before we start, if you are not yet subscribed, please click the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you do not miss new health tips created especially for you. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment with the number 1, if not, with the number 0, so I know how to improve the content for you. The first mistake is starting to exercise immediately after waking up without preparing your body. Last Wednesday at 7:05 in the morning, a 71-year-old patient was brought to our neurology department after losing consciousness during a brisk walk in his neighborhood. He thought he was doing something good by getting up early and going for an energetic walk to recharge for the day. However, he did not realize that he was setting himself up for a mini-stroke that morning. He got out of bed too hastily without drinking water and immediately stepped out into the cold air. A few minutes later, he began to feel dizzy, lost his balance, and his left leg stopped supporting him. A neighbor found him lying on the sidewalk, confused and speaking incoherently. Incidents like this happen much more often than you might think. After the age of 60, the body's internal regulatory system, especially when you wake up, is still transitioning from a state of rest. Blood pressure in the vessels is low, blood vessels are relaxed, and the brain is not yet receiving a full supply of oxygen. A sudden transition from lying down to quickly standing up and starting physical exercises is like trying to start a cold engine and accelerate it to 60 miles per hour without preliminary warming up. A sudden change in body position, especially in elderly individuals, can cause orthostatic hypotension, a dangerous drop in blood pressure. For those with narrowed blood vessels, this can reduce blood flow to the brain enough to trigger a mini-stroke or even a full ischemic attack. And yet, this mistake happens every morning in homes across America. A sun can become your speech, your memory, your ability to move, to smile, or even to recognize loved ones. In one moment, you feel fine, and in the next, you may lose control over half of your body, possibly forever. The saddest part is that all of this can be prevented. The secret is not to stop moving, but to learn to respect the rhythm of an aging body. When you wake up in the morning, stay at the edge of your bed for at least 1.5 minutes. Breathe slowly, rotate your ankles, wiggle your fingers, and take a couple of sips of water. Allow your circulation to adjust to gravity before you start walking or stretching. This minor act of singing can add years of independence to your life. And do not forget, the brain does not tolerate haste. It does not matter whether you are late for your morning walk or trying to avoid the heat. It requires oxygen, stability, and consistency. Provide it with these, and it will reward you with clarity and endurance. Ignore its needs, and it may respond with silence when it is already too late. However, there is an even subtler, yet equally dangerous threat. What if you are breathing incorrectly during physical activity quickly, shallowly, and anxiously? Let me explain how your breathing can become a hidden risk factor for a stroke that you may have never considered. If you are still with us and find these ideas helpful, please write 1 in the comments so I know you are with me. Now let us move on to the second topic. The second point is about ignoring and breathing. Rapid, shallow breathing during morning exercises. A 68-year-old woman, a former teacher, was one of the most disciplined people I had ever met. She took walks every day at 6:30 in the morning, maintained a healthy diet, did not smoke, and did not drink. At first glance, she was doing everything right, but one morning she lost consciousness on her driveway. Her vision became blurry, her speech was slurred, and her right arm went numb. Her husband called an ambulance where I met her. She had a transient ischemic attack, commonly known as a mini-stroke, caused not by her diet or her heart, but by her breathing. She was unaware that she was making a common mistake that millions of elderly people make every morning. She was walking quickly and breathing just as quickly. With each step, her breathing became shorter and more frequent. She thought she was just pushing herself, but in reality, her brain was lacking oxygen. As we age, our blood vessels become less elastic, our lungs become less efficient, and our brains become more sensitive to even slight drops in oxygen levels. Rapid, shallow breathing, which doctors refer to as chest breathing, leads to decreased oxygen exchange. This causes the heart to work harder, narrows the blood vessels, and disrupts normal circulation in the brain. For people over 60, this can easily lead to dangerous situations, irregular heart rhythms, fluctuations in blood pressure, or even a clot reaching the brain. Breathing may seem like an automatic process, but during exercise, especially in the morning when the body is not yet ready, how you breathe can become a matter of life and death. You may be confident that you are taking care of your health, but in reality, you might be creating a hidden threat that could permanently rob you of your memory, ability to speak, or move. Unfortunately, no one has explained to her that the brain requires deep and calm breathing, just as it needs water and blood. If you breathe shallowly and quickly, your body perceives this as stress, and for an aging heart and brain, this false sensation can lead to real trouble. The solution is actually very simple, but most people are unaware of it. During physical activity, inhale deeply through your nose and exhale slowly through your mouth. Perform slow, rhythmic movements, synchronizing them with your breathing. If you start to feel short of breath, it means you are overexerting yourself. Morning exercise should nourish the brain, not shock it. Here is something that few people know. Strokes often occur not during exercise, but afterward, when the body suffers from a lack of oxygen and unstable blood pressure. And once brain cells die, they cannot be brought back. I often remind my patients that if you are exercising to live longer, breathe as if your life depends on it, because it truly does. Speaking of hidden threats, there is another one that creeps up just as unnoticed. If you train in the cold, without prior warming up or protection against the cold, you open the door to a stroke. Let me explain why this third mistake is so common and far more dangerous than the others. The third mistake is exercising in the cold without protection from low temperatures. It was a cold February morning when I met a 73-year-old veteran of the Korean War who was convinced that he needed to overcome discomfort. Every day, regardless of the weather, he would put on his sneakers and walk 3 blocks around his neighborhood, without gloves, a scarf, or warming up. He believed that cold air strengthened the body, but that morning, the cold nearly became fatal for him. Halfway through, he began to feel short of breath, then experienced dizziness. When he reached his doorstep, his speech became slurred, and his right arm went numb. His wife immediately recognized the symptoms and called for an ambulance. He survived an ischemic stroke caused by the cold due to the sharp constriction of blood vessels in freezing temperatures. Such cases are not uncommon. The incidence of strokes increases during the cold months, especially early in the morning. Why does this happen? Because cold weather is not only uncomfortable, it is dangerous for an aging body. As we age, blood vessels lose their flexibility. The cold causes them to constrict sharply, raising blood pressure and impairing circulation. This sudden constriction forces the heart to work twice as hard, and if the blood vessels in the brain are already weakened, even a small spike in blood pressure can lead to a rupture or blockage. Morning, the most dangerous time of day. The body is already in a vulnerable state with thicker blood due to overnight dehydration, a slowed heart rate, and sluggish blood flow. Add to this the cold air, stiff joints, and lack of warm clothing, and you have the perfect storm brewing within the body, especially if you are over 60. But even more dangerous is the misconception that you are doing something beneficial. You continue to move and stay active, and that deserves approval. However, if you go out into the cold wearing only a light jacket and sneakers, especially without warming up beforehand, you may be putting your brain at risk without realizing it. I have treated patients who lost the ability to speak, their coordination, and even their independence due to a brief walk in unsuitable conditions. It is important not to abandon physical exercise, but to do it wisely. Before stepping outside, check the temperature. If it is below -13 degrees, consider postponing your walk or exercising at home. Always dress in layers, cover your head and hands, and warm up indoors for 50 minutes before heading out. Your brain, heart, and future will thank you. One patient survived, but now cannot walk without assistance. He requires speech therapy and constantly repeats the same thing. If only he had worn a hat, if only he had waited an hour, he would not have found himself in such a situation. The cold can be merciless. It does not make noise but silently seeps into the bloodstream and constricts everything until something breaks. Do not let the morning frost become your last solitary walk. And while the cold constricts from the outside, there is another danger arising from within when you exercise without water. Most elderly people do not feel thirsty in the morning, but this hidden dehydration can lead to a stroke, of which you may be completely unaware. Let me explain why in the next section. If you are still watching and find these tips helpful, please write "@ in the comments so I know you are here. Now let's move on to point number 4. 4. The lack of water consumption before or after morning exercises. A 76-year-old patient, who experienced what she thought was a random stroke, was active and full of life. She went for a walk every morning after feeding the birds. However, like many elderly people, she did not think about her habits. She would wake up, get dressed, and immediately go for a walk without drinking a drop of water. This seemingly minor detail turned out to be more costly than she could have imagined. One morning, about 15 minutes into her walk, she felt dizzy, lost her balance, and her vision became blurry. She managed to return home, but by the time she sat down, her speech had already become slurred. We conducted tests and scans that revealed a microstroke, thickened blood, and mild dehydration. She had no idea that skipping a simple glass of water every morning was slowly increasing her risk. With age, the sense of thirst diminishes. Even when the body needs moisture, we do not always realize it. Blood pressure, heart rate, and brain blood flow slow down and become more vulnerable. After a night of sleep, when the body remains inactive for 6 to 8 hours, the blood becomes slightly thicker. Blood pressure becomes less stable, and the heart works harder to pump blood to the brain. Now imagine moving, even taking a light walk in such a state. This is what she did every week, and she is not alone. Thousands of elderly people start their day in a state of dehydration, putting immense strain on the cardiovascular system, especially in the morning when blood pressure naturally rises. A lack of water in the body leads to the narrowing of blood vessels and a decrease in oxygen supply to the brain, which are two main factors that can cause a stroke. If you are taking diuretics or medications to lower blood pressure, this effect is amplified significantly. The problem is not what you feel, but what goes unnoticed. You may not have a headache or a dry mouth, but your brain, heart, and vascular system are working under strain due to a lack of fluids. One patient fully recovered, but this was preceded by months of physical therapy. Her left hand still trembles when lifting a glass, reminding her of how a simple habit could have prevented her condition. Water is not just support for an aging brain. It is its energy, flow, and life. I always remind my patients that a lack of water in the body leads to an unnoticed risk. Drink a glass of water at room temperature, and then another one. It takes just a few minutes, but it can protect your brain for many years. Elderly people often do not understand that not only the morning routine is important, but also its regularity. In fact, sudden changes in the level of physical activity, especially after the age of 60, can put more strain on the heart than you might think. Let me explain how irregular workouts can shock the heart and affect the brain in unpredictable ways. Inconsistent exercise, where you overdo it on some days and skip others, puts pressure on your heart and blood vessels. A 70-year-old patient, a former construction company manager, took pride in his work capacity and his decision to start morning walks on his cardiologist's advice. However, like many of his peers, he found himself in a dangerous trap. He exercised when he felt good, and on those days, he tried to make up for lost time. For a week or two, he walked briskly, stretched for a long time, and felt great, but then he would get tired and skip several days. Feeling pushed to regain his strength, he would double the distance on his next walk. He thought he was doing the right thing, but he was not giving his heart and blood vessels the consistency they needed. One morning, after returning from a fast 45-minute walk, which was twice as long as usual, he lost consciousness in the kitchen. He was found by his wife. He was conscious but disoriented and could not lift his right arm. He had a mild stroke. While studying his history, I noticed a common and often hidden pattern of blood pressure fluctuations. Hearts, accustomed to moderate activity, were shocked by sudden overloads. These irregular rhythms create stress in the blood vessels, increase inflammation, and create ideal conditions for the formation of blood clots or ruptures in the brain's vessels. Few realize that irregular exercise is just as dangerous as a lack of it. The human body, especially after reaching 60 years of age, functions best at a smooth pace rather than under high-intensity loads. Elderly individuals often hold the belief that more is better. However, a sharp transition from inactivity to intense workouts does not strengthen the body, but poses a threat to the heart and brain. Sudden high loads lead to rapid spikes in blood pressure, which may exceed what aging and less elastic arteries can withstand. Furthermore, the recovery of the cardiovascular system in older adults occurs more slowly, increasing the likelihood of delayed recovery and the risks of stroke or heart disease. The patient is now recovering, but his movements have become slower than before. He regrets not taking his morning walks as seriously as safety settings, with preparation, routines, and respect for his own limits. If your goal is to live longer, engage in physical activity that supports the heart rather than shocks it. This means doing short, regular exercises every day instead of rare, exhausting workouts that leave you spending days on the couch. Think of physical activity as medicine, with the right dosage needed at the right time each day, neither too little nor too much. The harsh truth is that not only the level of your activity affects the risk of stroke, but also how you recover. This leads to a common mistake made after a walk when you return home, cool down, and make one small but potentially deadly error with your medications. Let me explain what happens when elderly individuals skip or incorrectly take their medication after exercise and how it subtly undermines your brain's safety. Just 3 months ago, a 74-year-old patient came to me, who, after losing her husband, took pride in her independence. Each morning, she would walk 3 laps around her neighborhood and then enjoy a cup of coffee. The blood pressure pills were on her table, but she often ignored them. Today, she thought, I feel fine. Why take them if I am okay? She came to me after suffering a mild stroke that affected her speech and coordination. When I inquired about her morning habits, she admitted that she did not always take her medication or took it several hours after waking up, depending on her mood. On days when she exercised, she often thought, well, maybe I do not need the pills since I am already moving. This is one of the most dangerous misconceptions I encounter among elderly people. After 6 decades, the body does not regulate its functions as effectively. Blood pressure changes more rapidly, the heart becomes more sensitive to stress, and the brain is even vulnerable to minor disruptions in blood flow. By skipping the morning dose of blood pressure medication, you allow your arteries to experience a dangerous spike. If you take blood thinners or cholesterol medications irregularly, you put yourself at risk of forming clots in the vessels that are supposed to sustain brain function. After intense exercise or an adrenaline rush, combined with dehydration, you may inadvertently create conditions that are ideal for a stroke. Medications are not optional based on how you feel. They are designed to prevent invisible harm that gradually accumulates in the vessels, such as plaque formation on the artery walls or unstable heart rhythms, which often manifest when it is already too late. The patient now takes her medication on time thanks to reminders from her devices and alarms, as her memory and some independence have been lost due to what seemed like a harmless oversight. I remind every patient that you lock your doors at night, even if no danger is expected. You take your medication in the morning for the same reason, because the threat already exists. However, even if you do everything right, stretch, breathe deeply, drink water, take your pills, there is still another hidden threat lurking every morning for elderly individuals, ignoring the first urge to use the restroom. What this can do to your brain will surprise you. Your morning habits shape the future of your brain. Every morning, your brain awakens alongside you, slowly and carefully, needing protection. Yet most strokes that I treat in people over 60 years old are not the result of chance or misfortune. They are the result of daily habits that seem harmless or even beneficial, but silently undermine brain protection. Getting up too quickly and straining before the body has adapted, shallow breathing during exercise, going out into the cold unprotected, skipping water, exercising without rhythm. And worst of all, skipping or misusing the restroom. These are not minor oversights. These are mistakes that accumulate over months and years. And one day, your speech may become slurred, your hand may become immobile, and your memory may slip away. The saddest part is that almost all of this is preventable. Your brain does not need heroic physical exertion or perfect diets. It needs consistent care and respect. Slowly waking up in the mornings, deep rhythmic breathing, gentle and fluid movements, a full glass of water, a warm scarf, and a timely taken tablet, even if you feel well. These small actions may seem insignificant, but for an aging brain, they make the difference between clarity and confusion, between independence and dependence, between life before and after a stroke. I have seen the consequences of ignoring these habits in faces that no longer recognize loved ones, in hands that cannot help themselves, in eyes that have fallen silent too soon. But I have also witnessed the power of awareness and small, conscious changes. I have observed patients returning stronger, clearer, and more confident, simply by taking control of their morning routine. So I will leave you with this thought. Your brain does not care what day it is today. It only cares about what you do with it. Every choice you make before 9 in the morning sets the tone for your blood pressure, circulation, memory, and mood. You do not need to strive for perfection. It is enough to show mindfulness, consistency, and kindness to yourself, as a stroke can come without warning. But if each morning you listen attentively to your body, you will be able to catch its quiet whisper long before the loud alarm. This awareness will become your true salvation. These lessons are designed to inspire you to live a full and genuine life. I would love to hear from you. Think about and share one thing you have learned and plan to implement in your life. Let us support each other on this journey toward embracing these truths. Thank you for watching. And here's to living life on your own terms.